Hello and welcome to Super Atheist Bros episode 3. I am Turtle along with Gavagai,
Hello.
and today we're going to be talking about a couple of different issues. We're going to be talking about the uh, recent ruling by the Supreme Court uh, against Hobby Lobby. That's correct? Is that
Yep.
is that correct? I should form that.
Well, they ruled in favor of
Oh, I'm
Hobby
sorry.
Lobby.
Yes, you're right. It was
Yes.
um, Hobby Lobby. I couldn't quite remember if that was the company or not, but yes, they ruled in favor of Hobby Lobby. And then additionally, we're going to be talking about some of God's traits that I think pretty much all the theists in general agree with, and some of the implications of what those traits would be for a God. But first, we're going to do a little bit of follow-up on topic we talked on last week. I think this will be a pretty quick discussion here. But Gavagai, you ran across I guess a atheist version of the coexist bumper sticker.
Yeah, that's right. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up a screenshot of the uh, this bumper sticker here. Can you
Yeah, I
see
can
that?
see that
Okay,
now.
great. So last week, well, the original bumper sticker that kind of set off this chain of response bumper stickers was the coexist, and we mentioned that last week. And then there was a Christian response that said one way with all Christian symbols. And one of the comments that we made was that the coexist thing just kind of says, okay, well, let's agree to disagree. And the we felt well, the one way thing was almost kind of like a flipping the bird at the idea that we can agree to disagree and can't even get along. It's our way or the highway. So when I saw this fiction, which is the atheist kind of response to that same bumper sticker concept, I thought it's only fair to just bring it up. And I feel, I don't know how you feel, Turtle, but myself, when I see it, on the one hand I feel, well, yeah, that's true, and it's kind of funny. But at the same time, if the one way bumper sticker is kind of a
Flipping the
flipping
bird.
off, yeah, to to the uh, to the coexist concept that we can be just peacefully coexist, then I think it's only fair to say that this is suffers from that same criticism or is vulnerable to that same criticism.
Yeah, I think if this had been a completely original idea, it would be great.
Yeah.
But because it's a response to something that already exists, and this benefits from using a lot of the same letters as the coexist, so it happens to use all the symbols in a couple. It adds a Stonehenge uh, monument at the end for the N, and
Yeah,
it's
and I think the F is maybe like the fairy tales kind of
yeah, that's
thing.
exactly what I was thinking as well. But other than that, I mean, it's got a lot of the same letters in it. Skips over like the non-religious, like the male and female symbols that are in the coexist. But I think if because I mean the one thing you can say about the coexist bumper sticker, which I my problem with it is just I think it's naive, the coexist bumper sticker, but it is clearly a clever thing, a clever idea of taking all these things and making the word coexist is clever. And if had this been an original idea, it would be very clever as well. But it's not, and I agree, it is kind of. While I am amused by it, I do feel like it does suffer from the same problem as the one-way bumper sticker.
Right. Yeah. Like I still like it so much that I'd almost be tempted to I
Yeah,
might get one and just hold it on the side somewhere. Yeah, but yeah, you're exactly right that if it wasn't kind of a response to the original, that it would be much better. But what are you gonna do?
yeah. All right, so you want to move on to the Supreme Court case?
Sure. Right, and so I'm sure most of our listeners are probably aware that the Supreme Court has made a decision. They've ruled in favor of Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby objected to the uh, uh, segment of the uh, healthcare law that says that they have to provide health insurance that includes abortion services for women. And so they said, well, we object to providing health care that includes abortion services to our employees because we object to abortion on religious grounds. And in short, the Supreme Court said that's a valid concern, or it's a violation of your religious rights and freedom of religion as a corporation. Um, so, first of all, the whole idea that corporations have the same rights to religious expression and freedom of speech and things as human beings, people, is a mistake that the Supreme Court has been making in a number of cases
Since like the mid
in the last few
2000s.
years. Yeah, and that's a disturbing trend for one thing. But there's another reason that this case in particular is concerning. There was a meme posted, I forget where it was, and I'm going to go ahead and bring this up because I think it articulates the idea pretty well. Hang on here, I've got it up. Let me share it. Oops. Okay. So the quote is, when your Jehovah's Witness boss refuses to let you have a blood transfusion, when your Scientologist boss refuses to cover your psychiatric medication, and when your Christian Scientist boss refuses to cover anything, thank your wonderful Supreme Court. The floodgates have been opened to allow an individual boss to dictate your healthcare choices. And people say Obamacare is an intrusion on your freedoms. Wake up, America. So obviously that's a little slanted toward certain political outlook and things, but I think that the overall idea that this really does open floodgates with regard to what your boss can do, and kind of the violation of the separation of church and states and overstep. It's remarkable and frightening.
Just as a bit of a side note, it seems like there's a weird, disturbing trend amongst, the conservative side to just, and not even the people that are in the positions of power, but for the people who work, like people I work with, who I work in a factory, who they seem to want these corporations to have just this supreme amount of power over and be able to do whatever they want over the people that are underneath them, which I don't know how that came about. Like, it seems to have come on within the last, basically, I feel like it started kind of around the time Fox News started really becoming an entity. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah,
Maybe
well, I think it started before that even. I think, kind of with the Reagan era and this whole idea that unions are bad and unions are hurting business and industry and things, and that has all kind of snowballed into this, I don't know, almost deification of corporate America that is bizarre. There's like a collective amnesia related to just our history and how the robber barons back in the late 1800s and and how they just controlled everything. You had to go to the company store to buy things.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's absurd. And if they can dictate what you can do with your health care, well, what if they want to see what you're spending your wages on? Can they say, well, I don't believe in using or people drinking alcohol, so I'm gonna cut out the amount of income that you earn. And this is
Or they
maybe an
find out that
exaggeration.
you're spending income on alcohol, and they have grounds to terminate you or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or they object to pornography, or whatever it is. But our country is based on the idea that you have freedoms, and unless you're doing something that is harming
Violating
someone
someone.
else,
Yeah.
you should be able to do that. And this is a gross overreach, I think.
Yeah. Along the same lines as that. Was it a text or that
That
thing you just
meme, yeah.
the meme that you brought up? That was my thoughts as well. I mean, it opens the floodgates for. And that's, to me, I think that's ultimately the solution to this problem. We at this point in time, the atheists and the people who realize that this is a problem are reliant on another crazy group coming in and saying, hey, we also need to take advantage of this situation. We're a religious group that has ideas, and we need to be respected as well. And they need to come in and make it clear to all of the people who think this is a good idea at this point in time that this is a terrible idea. And sort of along these same lines, there was in Oklahoma, was it the courthouse in Oklahoma? Do you know what I'm?
Yeah, I think it was at the state capitol,
Okay,
or
yeah,
it could be the courthouse too. I don't know.
but they Satanists in that area built because that state house has a copy of the Ten Commandments, and
It's a rather large monument that was recently put there, I believe.
yeah, and the grounds by which they say that the people who support the Ten Commandments being put there is they say, well, this is a part of history or what, which I think is pretty questionable. But anyway, that I mean, it's a story that's been told in history. I would agree with that. But they so these Satanists built a what is the term for it? A Baphomet? Is that right?
Yes, a Baphomet.
So they built this, and now just if there's any Christians listening, when I say this, know that I say this in the same way that if they had built a statue of Darth Vader, it would be the same kind of response. But I think this is actually kind of cool in a weird way. The statue is pretty gnarly. Again, in the same way as if they had built a Darth Vader statue, that would be pretty gnarly as well. I don't agree with it, but I think it makes the point that if you can have your religious symbols incorporated into this non-religious, what is supposed to be a non-religious area, then anybody can, and you don't really have the grounds to deny them. And it's the same issue with the Supreme Court ruling, is if you want to have your religious elements thrust into a secular law, then guess what? Everybody gets to do the same thing, and there are really no bounds on what anybody can claim as their religion. I mean, the only reason that Christianity is taken more seriously than Satanism or paganism of any sort is just because it happens to be more popular. There's no more.
Right.
It's just the thing that happens to be the most popular, and that's why it gets away with this stuff, is because it happens to be popular.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I think a lot of believers, like the idea of being able to display their religious symbols and things and whatever, but don't think about the consequences. In, in on the one hand, I think they kind of think that they are maybe in they give lip service to the idea of equal rights for everyone, but they
Mhm.
don't actually believe it when the rubber meets the road. And I had a conversation with our father, who is in general a pretty level-headed guy,
Yeah.
but he was saying, well, if that's the majority of the views of the people in the community, then they should be able to display that, and the other people don't. It's democratic or whatever. But that's not. I mean, you're giving those people rights, and you're taking away rights from other people if that's the case.
The
And his
Constitution.
response was, well, they can leave then.
The Constitution exists to protect the minority from the majority.
Exactly.
That's why.
Oh,
That's why the people who were in England and other parts of the world left the parts of the world they were in and came here to be protected. But anyway, I think our views are pretty clear at this point. But
yeah.
so moving on to our final discussion. This is a, when I talked about reasons that I kind of lost my religion. Um, I would say that although these issues, well, to some extent, the hell issue I think does fall into this conversation, but I don't plan on bringing it up today. But we may get into it anyway. But um, I think the thing that kind of killed my even shadow of a doubt for me that there was a possibility of a God was my own internal discussions with myself about all of the traits that God supposedly has and how those would work in reality. Um, and I've kind of wrote down a list of thoughts I have on this, and I titled it "Painting a Picture of God in Your Mind." I think it's very easy, and I think the vast majority of people who know of the Christian God have these ideas of, okay, well, he's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he's eternal, he's benevolent, and they don't think about those things and how they interact and how weird they really are when you actually think about them.
And when they map to the real world that we exist in, and
Exactly.
the implications there, yeah.
Um, and a lot of people, when they think of God, they think of, and this is kind of the generic, almost cartoon version. I would say that most people don't think this is what he actually looks like, but something in the ballpark of, uh, a guy up, a very large man with a big white beard and white robe, and there's a lot of people who would say, well, I don't really believe in he looks like that, but something along those lines is kind of the generic picture of God. Um, and if would you bring up that other image that I discussed with you there, Gavagai? To me, the picture of God, I think, when you really think about it, is something more like this. Is more like the image from John Carpenter's The Thing. Um, just an insane amount of power, an insane amount of uh, brain capacity to the point of being completely incomprehensible. Um, but let me get into some of what I mean here. All right, so the first thing I want to bring up is the idea of God being eternal and God being all-knowing. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this, Gavagai, but at some point in time, God created the universe that we know. The, for trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions, more than that amount of time, God sat there knowing he would do this, not doing it. What was God doing all of that time? My image of God pre-creation is God is just this being floating in black, not doing anything. And now I recognize, and a lot of things I'm going to bring up here aren't necessarily contradictions. I think in some cases they are. But I think they just paint this very bizarre image of God when you think about it. But now it's possible that God was making other universes
Right, a
or doing other things.
multiverse.
Sure. But and that's a real possibility. The Bible never mentions anything about that. So, but it's possible. But even if that's the case, even if God made 15 other universes before this one, the problem still exists. There is still an eternity before God starts doing that. Now, the other possibility is maybe God was always doing this. There are an infinite number of universes or things that God made. Maybe he didn't spend all his time on universes. Maybe he made other things that we can't comprehend. But how special are we then, if that's the case? We are just one of an infinite number of things that God has made.
Right, and when you look out at our universe and the fact that we're this tiny, tiny dot in a galaxy, or in a solar system, in a tiny, and the solar system is just a tiny speck in the galaxy.
Yeah.
And then there are millions of galaxies, billions of galaxies that are out there. Yeah, that seems to be the way. If you had to guess at his MO, if this God exists, it seems like that's the way he would do it. Is like gross overkill.
Yeah. But let's assume for a moment that we are the only thing that God had. Like, God made this universe and put us on Earth, but he wasn't doing anything before that. Doesn't that image of God sitting there for eternity, just knowing that he would at some point do all of these things, like knowing without a shadow of a doubt exactly how all of this would play out, doesn't that sort of render his omnipotence in question? Isn't that kind of, is he chained to his own fate? Like, is he capable of creating the universe differently at a different point in time? To me, it
Right.
doesn't seem that way.
Yeah,
Thought
one of the
experiment.
things that it brings to my mind is what maybe he's trying out different things in these different universes, like in another alternate universe, instead of sacrifice being the ultimate payment for sin, it's raping, and so that people had to rape the Messiah or something. Just absurd. Why is killing things the
Yeah.
solution to sin? Right? Well, why not some other horrible thing? Killing things and setting them on fire.
Well,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
he doesn't mention these other universes, but maybe they do exist. But
Right.
either God has made an infinite amount of universes forever. I mean, that's just insane to think about. But or he didn't, and we're either the only one or one of a few, and there's this sort of bizarre image of God, this all-powerful being, just sitting on his hands for an eternity until some arbitrary point in time, which he then creates things. Okay, so that's kind of my first little thought experiment. But then, being that God is omnipotent, I think in and of itself creates a problem, and not in the kind of generic, well, can he make a boulder so heavy that he himself cannot push, or something like that. But the here's the question: is God capable of caring about anything? Can something that is omnipotent actually care about anything? And I would put forward that the reason that we experience love, joy, sorrow, and anger, and any kind of emotion like that is because of our limitations. It's because we are capable of losing things. And so we appreciate the things we do have or the things that we want. Um, and when we lose those things, we experience the negative aspects of that. And when we have those things, we experience the positive aspects of that. And I would make an analogy: if somebody who puts down a $100 bet, now if that bet is put down by somebody who only has $100, the outcome of that bet is going to be very significant for that person. Now, someone who is a billionaire who makes that same $100 bet, the outcome is fairly trivial to them. Now, somebody who is omni-wealthy, somebody who has an actual infinite amount of wealth, what does that bet mean to them? I would say that that bet is absolutely meaningless, that there is no consequence to that bet, and winning or losing that bet wouldn't even enter into their mind. It doesn't mean anything. So for God or any omnipotent being, how does a God even like I think with a Christian they'll point to, they'll say something like, oh well, you are special to God. How could I be special to God? God can make an infinite number of me. Even if you claim, well, you're unique. Well, I'm only unique if God chooses not to make more of me.
Yeah,
How do
that's a very interesting point. I've never thought about that, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Value is directly proportional to uh, the quantity of whatever it is, the resource, and yeah,
I mean, everything that is claimed to be important to God should, in theory, be completely arbitrary to God. There's nothing that God can't replace. There's nothing that he can miss. And then still venturing out of the omnipotent area, but still kind of staying in the issue of God caring about things. I mean, there are multiple instances within the Bible of God being angry at people or God seeming to be surprised by events that take place. And, I mean, this is not anything incredibly new, but if God is all-knowing, is he even capable of being angry or happy or upset? Like, it seems... Here's my example I have. A number of years when the Milwaukee Bucks, and this is... I happen to be a Milwaukee Bucks fan, but a number of years when the Milwaukee Bucks were actually a good team in the early 2000s, I wasn't able to watch one of their playoff games, so I had taped it, and when it was airing, so I went back and I knew ahead of time that they had lost. I knew that before I was able to watch it, but I still ended up watching it, and I felt as things were happening, and it was a close game, and it came down to like the last couple of seconds, and Glenn Robinson missed this short-range shot that he should have made, and that would have been the difference. But there was this after I had watched it, there was, and I had, even though I knew they lost, I had this the same kind of similar emotions, although I didn't have the surprise of being upset that they lost. And I think that if I was a Christian, I would kind of view God in that way. of like, oh well, he knows how things are going to play out, but he still gets upset as they happen. But the difference for me would be, I would view God as more of like me watching that same game again and again and again and again, to the point of I know every single thing that happens by heart. How could anything even affect me at all at that point of Glenn Robinson missing that shot? I know it by heart. I know exactly where he is. When he misses the shot, I know where the other players are and what has just happened and what's going to happen afterwards. I can't imagine that would have any effect on me at all. Is
Yeah.
God is God in some different circumstance where maybe he doesn't have all the details, but he knows the general outcome? That's not the idea I get with omniscience.
Sometimes he rides the ride backwards. Sometimes he closes his eyes.
So it's just, and this is why I think that image of John Carpenter's The Thing is a more appropriate image of God. It just does, like, if he's really completely all-knowing and omnipotent, I don't know how he could possibly care about anything. Nothing could surprise him. I mean, to me, this is a worse fate than death, is being God. Like, nothing matters. Nothing is relevant.
But that goes also a long way to explain the way he behaves in the Old Testament, for sure.
Well, sometimes. So, I mean, when he's, doing, like, violent things, but it takes away his motive for me, in my opinion, of, like, why he should care whether or not Sodom and Gomorrah are doing whatever they're doing. It seems completely irrelevant to me. So, kind of having touched on that, my next point I want to bring up is the idea of justice for an omnipotent being. And this was kind of, I think, what really killed the idea of God for me. Like I mentioned in my last point, it seems that there would be no reason for God to care about anything. But if we kind of ignore that for a moment, and the idea of hell and justice, to me, are just completely, there's a big problem there for me, because to me, if you, like, a strict definition of justice, especially biblically, is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You steal $100 from me, you have to give me $100 back. Like, that's pure justice. And I don't even necessarily think pure justice is what we should shoot for, but that's a different conversation altogether. But if God is interested in that, and he is sending people to hell for eternity, the only way that to me makes sense is if those people are causing God to suffer the equivalent of hell. Which, if that's the case, that seems incredible. I mean, it seems insane to me that there are billions of people all causing God to feel the equivalent of hell. And on top of that, God knew all of this in advance and pushed this into motion.
Yeah. It was like he's a
He's
he
a
would have to be
master.
a weird sociopath. Yeah. I'm going to create billions and billions of people, and each one of them is going to cause me suffering to the point where
Eternal suffering
yeah,
to the point of,
right.
like, or else it is unjust. I mean, if it isn't causing that problem for God, then his punishment is clearly not just, I would say.
That's fair to say, in my opinion, as well.
And now another issue I have, and I briefly just threw this out in, I think, our first conversation where we were talking about the Delonte debate. Is omniscience even possible? And here's, and I grant that it's possible that I could be mistaken on this. I'll grant that even beforehand. But my question is, how can anybody truly know that they're not a brain in a vat? I mean, you can claim that something is omniscient and therefore knows they're not a brain in a vat, but even if God exists, now let me make an analogy here. Let's ignore God altogether, and let's say that the only thing that exists is the room that you're in. There is nothing outside of the room. There are no alternate dimensions, and you know everything inside of that room. You know every detail, every atom, everything inside of that room beyond a shadow of a doubt. But how could you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, know that you still weren't, even though there aren't other dimensions, how could you know for certain that there wasn't another dimension, or that you weren't a brain in a vat just merely perceiving this? How do you escape that under any circumstance?
It's hard to see that.
I don't think it's possible. And like I said, I grant, right, and this is why I wouldn't bring this up in a debate with a theist, especially not a presuppositionalist, because I feel like the answer they would give is just, well, you can. And it's kind of like, okay, well, we've reached a dead end. So
Yeah, God can do anything he wants.
yeah.
But yeah, that's their answer.
So I don't think it's possible. I don't think you could. I don't think there's ever a circumstance, and like I said, even if you in fact do know everything that exists, you can't know that you know everything that exists. Is my position. And then my last point, and I do feel like there was, I was talking to my friend yesterday about some of these things, and there was a couple of other ideas that popped up, and I didn't write them down. Now I don't remember them. But I'll end on this last one. So let's grant that there is an omnipotent, all-knowing being out there, eternal, whatever. How incredibly lucky are we that this being happens to be incapable of evil? That, I mean, there's no reason that a God couldn't be capable of evil. Are you familiar with the Twilight Zone episode where there is a small town and there is a child who, and it's not explained, I mean, it's a Twilight Zone, so anything, all rules are out the door. But there is
story style.
Yeah, short story style. A small child who is basically omnipotent. And I think he might even be omniscient too, or at least he's capable of reading other people's minds. And the entire town lives in terror of him, because if they think the wrong thing, they might get turned into something terrible. I think, I know there's I might be confusing this with the Simpsons parody of it. There was a Halloween episode in which they spoof this, and Bart turns Homer into like a Jack-in-the-Box. But I thought that actually came from the Twilight Zone episode itself. I could be mistaken about that. Maybe they just made that up for the Simpsons. But anyway, that the point still remains the same: is that this being, this child being, has all these powers, but it has no sense of justice or anything like that, and is just anything that kind of bothers him, he's willing to just remove that person or do something terrible to that person. And so this entire town lives in terror of upsetting this little child. And I mean, you can very easily conceive of this situation. I mean, even I know you have watched some of Game of Thrones. You're not you don't have HBO, so you're not caught up. But I mean, the character of Joffrey, I feel, is very similar.
Sure.
He's not omnipotent, but what makes him so terrible and terrifying is that he's basically he's the most powerful little brat in the whole universe of that universe. But how lucky would we be that there happens to be this omnipotent being that is pure good? I mean, what if he was pure evil? He could be. He could have been, but he happens to not be. He could have been completely indifferent. He could have been something in between, but according to the Christian belief, he happens to be pure good and incapable of evil. And aren't we really lucky that that's the case? Assuming that's the case.
Right. Yeah, so the thing that the quality of omnibenevolence, or completely good, always brings to my mind is the quote from Epicurus, the Greek philosopher. Shoot, and I thought I had it, but I didn't have the right one. And I'm trying to find it now.
Is it the Euthyphro dilemma?
No, that's Socrates and Plato. But the Euthyphro dilemma does kind of play into that sort of, and it's probably was developed as a result. Epicurus came before Socrates, I believe. I could be wrong. I wouldn't swear to that. But shoot, give me just a second. I'm going to find it because here it is. And this actually kind of ties together several of the omni traits. So the quote is God willing to prevent the evil but not able, then he is not omnipotent. If he is able but not willing, then he is malevolent. If he is both able and willing, then where does evil come from, or whence cometh evil? If he neither is able nor willing, then why call him God?
Yeah.
And I think that gets to the point of it. All of these traits blended together kind of conflict with each other. So what do you do with that?
Yeah.
And the other thing that really kind of I don't know, gives me an itch that I need to scratch. Epicurus was however many thousands of years ago pointing this out, and still this concept is of a God with these traits is perpetuated and perpetuated. Why? Why have people not said, yeah, that's right, that's a serious problem? I don't know. Maybe it comes down to the it makes me feel good thing. So I'm gonna believe whatever I want. But that's
I mean,
I digress.
the bailout, I think, is just, well, God works in, like, we can't know and we can't understand God. So, which is convenient, It's either that's the case or this is all kind of made up and it doesn't really work even when you really try and make it work. One of those two is probably the case. But
yeah, well, and the thing that bothers me about the idea that we're so far below God that we can't we can't know even whether or not what he's doing is good. We don't have the ability to judge. Well, if that's the case, then it's very possible that we are serving an evil being.
Yeah.
If you commit to this being whose acts appear to you to be immoral, but you are going to dismiss that because you are incapable of judging, Well, if you're incapable of judging him, his acts as being wrong, then you're incapable of judging his acts as being good as well. So you're just blindly following this being. So either you have a broken moral compass and you don't have any means of discerning whether or not the being you're serving is good, or you are willfully serving a being that you perceive as immoral, and you're right that he is immoral. So
Yeah, and another thing, and I actually I brought this up to you when you were still a Christian, but it falls in the kind of Euthyphro dilemma issue of just the problem with God being the dictator of morality is, if that is really the case, is that means that morality is really arbitrary from God's point of view. Meaning, if God is all powerful and he is the thing that makes the decision on what is right and what is wrong, and it isn't a matter of, like, for me, morality comes down to consequences. It's a matter of, does this action have, what is the outcome of this action versus this of not doing that action. And that's what morality comes down to for me. But if that isn't the case, morality is just a decision made by God, and he doesn't take into account anything beyond him, then it is just an arbitrary decision by God. So when we bring up this issue of, how lucky we are that God is incapable of evil, it's like, well, by definition, he couldn't be evil because he is the one deciding what is evil and what isn't. So, I mean, unless he was a hypocrite, which, I mean,
it's another issue altogether.
Apparently can't be, just by default. And I think what it boils down to for me is it more likely, given all of these issues, that this thing exists, or is it more likely that thousands of years ago somebody was trying to come up with something that sounded really cool but didn't really think through all the implications of what happens when you... I mean, it's like with Superman, you can give him all these traits, but then when you try and figure out, well, how does he really fly? Like, how does that work? And it doesn't really work out. You just still kind of go like, oh, well, it's cool that he can fly, so I'll ignore that issue. I feel like this is the same kind of thing. So I come down on the side of, I don't think God is real. I think it's more likely that somebody just created this idea and threw all these traits onto it because it sounded neat at the time.
Yeah, well, and it works to explain, all of the things that you don't understand or don't know about the world, and and also can help perpetuate your society if you can get people in line with you by appealing to this, being, and,
Sure.
and say that's where your authority comes from. Then, hey, it really, if your authority comes from the most powerful being in the universe, then who can say anything against you, right?
Yeah, that's true. So, do you have anything else you want to go over here?
No, I think that about wraps up. I think you did a good job presenting all of those.
All right. Well, do you think there's any chance you'll... I don't know how relevant it will be. I plan on seeing the new Planet of the Apes movie this afternoon with a couple of friends. I don't know if it'll be relevant to this show or not. I'll shoot you an email. Do you think there's any chance you'd be able to catch it if I think that it's relevant?
Yeah, sure.
So there's a possibility we'll be reviewing and giving our thoughts on the new Planet of the Apes movie. The original series had a bit to do with science versus religion and that. I don't know whether or not this one will. It's supposed to be pretty good from what I've heard so far, so I'll take a look and I'll shoot you an email. But yeah, I think until next time, that does it for this episode of SAB.
All right, go super atheist brothers.
Yeah. See ya.
All right, take care.